What's up, guys? Welcome back to Deck Tech for Decks. I'm your host Caleb. If you want to support me, you can now follow me on Patreon. Not only is it the best way to support the channel, but additionally you'll get more say in what decks I cover. Special shout out to my high contributing patrons. Newsome, you rock. Now let's get into today's video, and today we're going to be talking about the budget card draw I find myself using most. We're going to cover all 5 colors, at least 5 different options of card advantage, because at the end of the day, if you're drawing cards, you're playing Magic, so I think that's probably the most important part of a deck. And then at the end of the video, I will throw in some of my favorite multicolored card advantage pieces on a very extreme budget. So without further ado, let's get into it. We'll start off with an easy one, black. There's a lot of good card advantage in black, but it kind of means you have to be doing a certain strategy, right? We have Altar of the Wretched. I'm really excited about this one. I haven't got a lot of opportunity to try it out yet, but it does exactly what I want to do, right? If we have big creatures, we sacrifice them, we mill a lot of cards, we draw a lot of cards, and then it's very flexible. You can flip this thing over and turn it into another big creature, so there's a lot of flexibility there. Disciple of Bolas has been my go-to for the Power Matters drawing effects in black. Also, she's just very efficient. Throw on the battlefield, you're going to gain some life, and you're going to draw a ton of cards. Midnight Reaper and Grim Horsepex, essentially the same thing. You're just going to be drawing cards whenever you are sacrificing those creatures. Notably non-token, but half the time in black you are using a lot of creatures that want to die, or in an aristocrat strategy, right? They, again, want to die. Phyrexian Arena, this thing used to be $40. It's now budget, so thank the power creep, and we can actually pick up a pretty decent card. This one, people have gone for more like explosive card advantage, but Phyrexian Arena is still a very good card. We also do have Night's Whisper, Sign in Blood, and Read the Bones. Just some card advantage, not very explosive, doesn't really get you there, but early game, these cards can really make sure you get into your land drops and you're not getting screwed on your mana, or draw you into the more card draw options like Phyrexian Arena that just draw you cards over the course of the whole game. Another one we have is Gix. Now, Gix is a little more expensive, but hey, if you're going wide and you can spend the $5, I really like this guy. It really incentivizes everybody to attack because everybody wants cards, and then in a game where you're trying to play more aggro, Gix can kind of be the perfect option for those decks. Moving on to green. Green, also a very easy one to get a lot of card advantage, but a lot of it's based on power. So we are going to be using cards like Rishkar's Expertise. One of my favorite ones because not only do you get to draw a lot of cards, which usually causes you to take a whole turn off, right? When you're casting a 6-mana spell, that's usually your turn. But Rishkar's Expertise lets you throw something into play that's 5 CMC, so that's also pretty busted. Then you have your other effects that do that, like Return of the Wild Speaker and Soul's Majesty. Super budget, they're just going to draw you some cards depending on your creature's power. I also do like Hunter's Insight. This one's a little bit risky, but it's one of those high risk, high reward cards, so I love it. As long as you have 8 drops and you just swing in, you can play this at instant speed, and if no one removes your creature, enjoy 8 cards. Pretty busted, but again, you need to make sure everybody's tapped out and there's no interaction because they will try to get rid of that creature by any means necessary, and you'll kind of get 2 for 1. So that's kind of why that one's probably budget, but I love it. Life's Legacy, Momentous Fall. If we can't just straight up draw the cards, we can sacrifice the creatures and then draw the cards that way. And then I did include some maybe not budget options, but very good bang for buck options, if that makes sense. Frostfang, this is another card that used to be upwards to like $40-$30, and now it's $5. It's very effective because now they don't want to block your 1/1 regardless because it has Death Touch. Now those elves can turn into card advantage. And then Toski, another one. This one's $7 just because it hasn't gotten a reprint. But again, indestructible, card advantage, turns all of your go wide strategies into a huge hand. Pretty good. Another one, or last one we're going to talk about, is Greater Good. I love Greater Good. Sits on the battlefield, sacks your biggest creatures, and provides a ton of card advantage over the course of a game. Moving on to red, we have Brass's Tunnel Grinder. I'm kind of high on this card because early game, if you need lands, you can get rid of all of your 8 drops and draw your lands. If you have a handful of lands, you can get rid of all your lands and draw you into useful cards. The only point in the game where this is not really that good is when it's the only card in your hand, because then it's kind of a cantrip. It does also flip into a land with Explore on it, but I'm just here for that amazing wheel effect. Another form of card advantage I've been really high on in red recently is the unexpected windfall effects. You have Seize the Day, Big Score. Not only do these draw you cards, but additionally they give you treasure tokens. So you are not only setting up for your next turn, but additionally you get more card advantage. And sometimes the treasure tokens give you enough mana to cast an additional spell, which is really useful. I also like Virtue of Courage. I know a lot of people aren't very high on Impulse Draw as a main source of card advantage, but in burn decks, this is perfect, especially when half of your spells cost like 1 red mana and you're trying to use stuff like Burgi or Urabrask to get that mana back. This is an insane card that really rifles you through your deck fast. We also have Act on Impulse, draw 3 cards in red, pretty crazy. Again, it is using that impulse mechanic, but seeing 3 cards for 3 mana is still pretty awesome. I also like Magus of the Wheel. Not ideal, but in red, if you have haste, it becomes a lot better. It's just a 5 mana wheel, which causes you to draw 7 cards if you have 0 cards in hand, and it's just one of the most effective ways to refill your hand on a guaranteed basis. Moving on to white, and guys, white's kind of one of the worst card advantage colors on a budget, because what happens is whenever they print something that's really good card advantage in white, since there's so little of it, the price instantly skyrockets. Take Esper Sentinel, amazing white card advantage. Not budget because, again, it's one of the only very useful forms of card advantage in white, and anything that comes close to that, again, skyrockets in price, so that kind of leaves us for very specific card advantage cards in white. So let's get into it. We have Welcoming Vampire, again, very reliant on you going with a token strategy or playing a lot of very low power creatures, but again, it can kind of be a white Phyrexian Arena, so it's going to be pretty useful. Mentor of the Meek, this one has a lot higher ceiling, especially if you have some ways to sacrifice tokens to get mana. Then you can just make tokens, sack the tokens, trigger Mentor of the Meek, draw cards, and it can kind of be a pretty solid engine in those white decks that need more card advantage. Norn's Wellspring, again, this is only really great in an aristocrat strategy, but in an aristocrat strategy, it's going to give you some solid card advantage. Then we have Sigarda's Splendor. This one's relatively new. You kind of note your life total, and then you got to try to gain life total. Hopefully your opponents don't hit you. And then on your upkeep, if you have more life total than the noted life total, you draw a card. It's basically Phyrexian Arena with extra steps, but in life gain decks, it's going to be pretty solid. Then we have Dawn of New Age. This one's budget. It's mythic, but budget. That kind of shows you how good it is. But honestly, if you go pretty wide, you slap this on the battlefield, and then it's going to draw you a couple cards, and then just gonna die. The reason why it's probably so cheap is because it's 2 mana, and when you have the mana to cast this, you probably don't have any creatures on the board, so it's late game card advantage that only gives you 1 card per turn. Not great, but in a scenario where you're hurting for some budget white card advantage, it'll do the trick. Now, moving on to blue, there's no shortage of budget card advantage in blue, but I'm kind of a creature guy, so I tend to go towards the reconnaissance mission effects and Bident of Thassa. Same thing, right? Whenever a creature deals combat damage, you're going to draw a card. And then I'm also high on Windfall. Windfall's amazing, just got reprinted, go ahead and pick it up. This card just keeps going up in price, and then they reprint it, and then it slowly starts going up in price. And the reason is, again, it's one of those cards that can take you from no cards in hand to a full grip instantly. And anytime you can do that, it's going to be pretty powerful. It also kind of disrupts your opponents because they're like, okay, I'm going to do this next turn. And then they look at their hand and it's gone in the graveyard and they've got a new hand. So it can be a little bit of disruption. You can draw them into the win too. But again, on a casual basis, I wouldn't worry about that too much. All you care about is, you know, having a fresh new grip. And at the end of the day, if you had no cards in hand, how are you going to stop that guy from winning anyway? So drawing cards is always the right option. Now, let's go to Fact or Fiction. This can straight up draw you 5 cards. Now, there is a lot of politics in this card, but if you say the right things, do the right stuff, you can get the cards that you want. Especially if you have a threatening board state or if someone's gone completely ahead of everyone else and you need to try to stop them. This card can be really good in those scenarios because you can either threaten your board state or say you need the cards to stop them, and they'll 9 times out of 10 give you either 4 to 5 of the cards, which can be pretty awesome. This card's not great ahead because they're just going to take the piece that you want, put it in one pile, and it's basically 5 mana draw a card, but again, it gets you the piece you want and it digs you super deep. especially if you can utilize your graveyard, because those cards will just end up in your graveyard. You don't have to shuffle them back in. So it's going to be really useful in the decks that can additionally utilize their graveyard. Pull from Tomorrow or any blue X spell is just solid in those decks that generate a ton of mana. If you can generate a ton of mana, you can go look up X blue spells that draw cards. There's a plethora of them, and they're all pretty useful, right? You just take a turn off, draw a fresh new grip, and then next turn you'll untap with more cards in your hand. Moving on to the multicolored cards that I find myself using, and again, this will probably speak to what I build as a player, because a lot of them are creature based. We have Greven. I just like power matter strategy, so the fact that you can sacrifice a creature, draw a ton of cards, and then smack somebody in the face for a ton of damage just really speaks to me as a player. Another thing is Inga and Asika. Not only are these guys or girls card advantage, but additionally they are ramp. So now all of your creatures are mana dorks that can draw you cards whenever you cast more creatures. Yes, I'm a fan of that. Elevere, super solid. This one hasn't really I haven't seen people using it outside of enchantment strategies, but at the end of the day, it enters the battlefield, throws a roll token on a creature, and then attacks, throws a roll token on a creature. So by turn 2, she's drawn you 3 cards, and then that just keeps getting better and better. Way better than the effects that just say, hey, draw a card at the beginning of your upkeep, right? It's just incremental card advantage that gets out of hand if people leave it alone. Additionally, she buffs up your creature, so she kind of does 2 things. It's amazing in the strategies that just like to swing and hit people in the face. Another thing is Edric Spymaster. Now, this is kind of card advantage for everybody, but at the end of the day, if you're trying to go wider than everybody, it's going to be a solid inclusion, especially if you're on a budget and kind of hurting for card advantage options. We do have Shauna Purifying Blade. This one's going to be solid as well because, again, super budget. I'd probably only play it in maybe like a Legends Matters deck. Like if you're playing the Joda, this would probably be a pretty good budget card to put in there. Now she's bigger, you can attack with her, you pay the mana, and then you just draw cards. But budget option, probably not a lot of decks she probably sees a play in, but I figured I'd include her on the list. Tatiova Benthic Druid, landfall, throw her in there. You're never going to hate it, especially when you're playing a lot of fetch lands or sacrifice lands. I shouldn't say fetch lands, we're talking about budget here. But I mean, you throw your Evolving Wilds on the battlefield, you sack Evolving Wild to get another land, boom, you drew 2 cards. She's incredibly impactful and honestly just draws a ton of cards throughout the game. So that's going to do it for today's video, guys. Let me know if you want to hear more budget options, more budget cards that I find myself using. Mostly, this was card advantage. We can cover removal. We can cover whatever you guys want. Just be sure to leave your suggestions in the comments down below. I'm definitely open to doing more videos like this. But again, I need your feedback because if I don't get feedback, I'm like, ugh, the video bombed. But at the end of the day, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed. As always, I hope this helped you in your deck building endeavors, and I will see you in the next one.